I've never felt so terrified of someone I once called a friend in my life. In November 2017, I met up with an old friend, someone I had known for a few years. We initially connected on a dating site, but over time, our relationship became strictly platonic. There were no red flags, and I completely trusted him. We chose to meet behind a bus station, on a grassy hill surrounded by trees. The plan was simple: have a smoke, catch up, and relax. I had only started smoking weed a few months prior, so I was still getting used to it. He brought something new for me to try: purple haze. I felt no anxiety about it, trusting him completely. After smoking a quarter of the blunt, I started to feel lightheaded and anxious. A strange discomfort washed over me, and I wanted to go home. When I asked, he insisted on taking me, saying I'd be safe with him. I declined, but he pressed again, saying, "Please let me take you home. I wouldn't hurt you." As I began to walk away, I felt disoriented, like I was walking on a cloud. Panic started to set in. Once we reached the bus station, I felt a bit relieved with so many people around. But my gut told me to get away from him. I told him I would call a taxi to go home. Suddenly, his tone shifted from friendly to stern. "I'm going to take you home now," he said, pulling at my jacket. I firmly told him no, that I could manage on my own. He yanked my jacket harder, and I stumbled into him. He pulled me closer, insisting I didn't need to be scared. But I was terrified. My paranoia intensified, and my vision blurred. I pushed him away and called for a taxi. He tried to grab my phone and yelled, "Do you ever listen? I'm taking you home." A few bystanders noticed and asked if I was okay. I just wanted to get home. Thankfully, a kind lady called a taxi for me and waited by my side, ensuring I was safe. When the taxi arrived, I hurriedly paid the driver and rushed inside. All I wanted was to be in my bed, the only place I felt safe. That evening, I lay in bed for 5 hours, staring at the ceiling, numb. I didn't think of much, but eventually I checked my phone and saw I had 32 missed calls from him, 10 voicemails, and over 50 messages. The messages were unsettling. He kept asking where I was and when I'd be home. One voicemail chilled me to the bone. He described a fantasy of taking me home while I was drugged, tying me up, and blindfolding me. I panicked, blocking him on all social media and his number. I warned him that if he contacted me again, I would call the police. For a month, I heard nothing. Then, out of the blue, I received a text from an unknown number asking how I was. I ignored it, but a follow-up message said they missed me and would see me soon. I asked who they were, but there was no reply. So, creepy person who pretended to be my friend, let's never meet again. I've shared this story with friends, and many believe that what I experienced wasn't just the effects of weed. They think I may have been given something much stronger and more dangerous. Don't want to wait for the easy way? All right, we will wait longer for the official way. I work as on-site IT for a company, handling user-end hardware and networking issues. Most of my calls are the usual user error or just turn it off and on again type. It can be mind-numbing at times, but I genuinely enjoy it. However, the bane of my existence, like many IT folks, is printers. One day I received a call from an office at the far end of campus. Bundling up, I grabbed my tools and made the trek over. When I arrived, the urgency was palpable. The staff was in a panic, claiming they desperately needed the printer. But only 3 out of 12 employees were in the office that day due to the cold, and they had multiple printers available. I did my best to fix the issue. I cleaned the printer, changed the rollers, and checked the settings, but it just wouldn't cooperate. After a frustrating struggle, I informed the woman who called that I would need to replace it. She was understandably upset, so I headed back to the shop to get a new printer ready. Once I had the replacement set up and working, I returned to the office, only to discover that the Ethernet cable had fallen behind a heavy filing cabinet. The wall plate it was plugged into was right in the middle of this 6-foot cabinet. There was no way for me to reach it, and the cabinet was too heavy for me to move alone. When I explained the situation, the user became frantic. Apparently, this was the only printer they could use, and it was the closest one to her. I reassured her that I could set up her computer to print to another nearby printer, and promised to return the next day with a tool to retrieve the cable. She insisted we call property management to move the cabinet immediately. I informed her that their turnaround time was typically 24 hours, unless it was an emergency, and they were only on call during weekends. Reluctantly, I called them on my mobile and put it on speaker. I managed to catch someone before they left for the day. He confirmed that they wouldn't be able to get to it until Tuesday at the earliest. I could hear the keyboard clicking and some light-hearted banter in the background. When he asked if I wanted to plug in the cable myself, I stifled a chuckle, knowing he was more than capable of doing that. The user looked stunned, as if she had just been hit with a reality check. The property management guy assured us they would come by Tuesday unless something urgent came up. And then he hung up. I turned to the user and said, "Well, that works for us in IT. I'll remove the old printer, and once property management confirms everything is done, we'll have a tech come by to ensure the new printer is working properly." Back at the shop, I shared the story with my fellow tech, and we had a good laugh about it. I called property management to cancel the request, letting them know I would bring my grabber tool the next day to retrieve the cable. They decided to wait until Monday to cancel, since doing so would trigger an email notification to the user. The next day, I successfully retrieved the cable with my tool, secured it back in place, and plugged it into the printer. Thankfully, everything worked perfectly, and I was able to close out the ticket. AITA for interrupting my autistic brother's routine for my own physical pain. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and I have a 15-year-old brother who is autistic. He has a nightly routine where he comes downstairs, watches TV alone, and falls asleep on the couch. Lately, my bed has become so uncomfortable that it causes me significant pain. I have a connective tissue disorder and scoliosis, which means my shoulders are misaligned and my left shoulder blade grinds against my ribs. My mattress is old, passed down from my sister, and after 5 years of use, it has lost its support. I wake up in severe pain, especially after spending hours lying on it. To cope, I've started coming downstairs to watch TV at night to avoid the discomfort of my mattress. However, my brother has taken issue with this change. He's brought our parents into the situation, and they usually side with him, insisting that I shouldn't disrupt his routine. Recently, when I told him I would be coming downstairs, he yelled at our parents, who surprisingly backed me up this time. Still, he confronted me with a lot of anger. I don't do this every night, only when my pain is unbearable. I've even invited him to sit in the love chair in the living room, asking him to use headphones or keep the volume low so I can enjoy my show. Instead, he turned the volume up to the max, making it impossible for me to focus. I feel guilty for interrupting his routine, but I also know I need to prioritize my health, especially since my parents often dismiss my struggles. I do have a TV in my room, but it's uncomfortable to watch from my bed. My brother has a computer with access to everything the TV offers, so he has options too. I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong here. Should I just endure the pain? Man tried to grab my baby from me on flight. I've flown solo with my 1-year-old nearly a dozen times. Usually, people are understanding and kind about having a baby on my lap. Overall, my little one is a happy, easy baby, and he's quite cute, so it's common for strangers to talk to him. I usually don't mind. On my last trip, I sat in the aisle with a man sitting directly behind me. My baby was tired and fussing, and I knew he needed a nap, but there wasn't much I could do until after takeoff. Right away, the man behind me started talking to my baby, saying things like, "Oh, hi, baby. Why is the baby sad? Such a cute baby." I smiled and explained that he was tired and apologized for the fuss. After takeoff, I tried to get my baby settled for a nap. The man continued to engage with him, even reaching for the seats to grab at his feet. I asked him nicely multiple times to please stop, explaining that my baby was tired and needed to rest. Finally, I set my baby down next to me so I could make a bottle. That's when the man stood up and reached over my seat to pick him up. I immediately leaned forward, saying, "No, thank you. I don't need help. Please don't." The man pushed me back into my seat, while mumbling, "Sweet baby, why is the baby crying?" I raised my voice and said, "No," as I quickly picked up my baby again. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. As I rocked my baby to sleep, trying to stay calm, the man reached through the seats to grab my arm, insisting, "No rocking, no rocking. You're making him cry." I pulled away and shouted, "Do not touch me." I hoped that would stop him, but it didn't. When I started rocking my baby again, the man reached both hands around either side of my seat to hold me in place, saying, "No, no rocking. Stop rocking." I felt a wave of panic and embarrassment as I clutched my baby to my chest, struggling to free myself from his grip. In a moment of desperation, I hit the call light and screamed, "Let me go. Do not touch me. Let me go. Let me go." When the flight attendants arrived, I could barely speak. Everyone around us was staring, and I was sobbing, begging them to move me. The man behind me tried to follow, but I told the attendants I didn't know him and he couldn't come with me. They moved me to a seat next to the flight attendants, and after a good cry, my baby finally fell asleep. Once I calmed down, I explained everything to the flight attendants. The man kept trying to return to my new seat, but the attendants stopped him each time. Towards the end of the flight, one of the attendants informed me that they had explained the situation to the pilot, who had called the FBI and local police to escort him off the flight. I would also be escorted off, along with everyone who witnessed the incident. He cheered as he was led away. I had to give a statement to the FBI and nearly missed my next flight. After my trip, I had to return through the same airport, which was incredibly stressful and emotional, even knowing he was banned from the airline and the airport. I haven't flown since. To the man who tried to grab my baby and wouldn't let go of me, let's never meet again.
He waited in line for this ridiculous flex. I'm an author on a book tour, sitting at a table in a big chain bookstore. In front of me is a stack of my books, and beside me stands a 7-foot-tall reproduction of my book cover. I'm chatting with someone while signing their book, and there are 3 people in line behind them. For my first book, having 3 people waiting is huge, and I'm enjoying every moment, working hard to make sure everyone has a great time. But then, I start to sense some impatience from the man at the end of the line. He's huffy, looking around, and trying to catch my eye while I write a lengthy dedication for the person in front. When the front person asks for a photo together, I happily agree, thrilled that someone wants a picture with me. That seems to set Grumpy Man off. "Really?" he barks. I try to stay calm. Maybe he's had a rough day or is late for dinner. So I ask the others in line if it's okay for him to jump ahead. They agree, and I motion for him to come up. He plops a bag down on the table and pulls out 3 copies of Geddy Lee's Big Book of Bass. "I need to return these," he demands. "Oh no." I put on my best apologetic smile. "I'm really sorry for the confusion," I say, gesturing at my stack of books and the giant sign beside me. "I'm the author of this book, and I'm here to sign copies today." "Do I look like I care?" "I need to return these," he shouts. "I understand," I reply, "but I don't work here. I'm just visiting to sign my book." I point toward the cash desk about 20 feet away. "I'm sure the wonderful people who work here will be happy to help you." "I stood in this line. I need you to help me," he snaps. I'm convinced he's not really listening. "I'm sorry about the confusion. It makes sense you thought it was a line for the cash, but it was actually for autographs. The good news is that there's no line at the cash." The others in line are enjoying the show, and a few people from the coffee shop have come over to watch. "Cut out this author nonsense and get me your manager," Grumpy Man shouts. I slowly stand up, pick up a copy of my book, and flip to the About the Author page. Holding it beside my face, I make the same smirk from the headshot in the book. This seems to do the trick. Grumpy Man snatches his 3 copies of Geddy Lee's Big Book of Bass and stomps over to the cash register. As a postscript, I wrote, "Cut out this author nonsense and get me your manager," below my signature, for the people who witnessed this absurd event. So to sum it up, Grumpy Man thought he was in line for cash, got mad when I couldn't process his return. You can't have it both ways. This story takes place during my time as a machinist, where I had a boss who made my life incredibly difficult. I could stop there, and many of you would understand. This boss was the owner's brother-in-law, someone who had no real management experience. He was simply given the position because of family ties. Let's just call him BH. After working there for 6 years, it was the week of my performance review. I had been unusually nice to BH that week, especially after a sales guy mentioned how my work had improved profits significantly. BH didn't appreciate that compliment and quickly cut him off, which made me realize I had some insider knowledge. When I finally sat down for my review, I felt good about my scores. They were all very positive. But then BH pulled out a different piece of paper. It outlined how I supposedly spent too much time socializing and needed to adjust my bathroom habits. I was stunned. He knew about my medical issues, yet he still made these claims. We got into a heated argument. I insisted that if my body needed to go, it had to go.
He claimed he had no proof of my bathroom visits, and in a moment of frustration, I yelled, "Keep your raise, just don't talk to me anymore." He threatened to fire me for insubordination, so I returned to his office silent while he continued talking. Afterward, I decided to follow his advice in a way that would benefit me. I subscribed to Audible and YouTube, wearing earbuds all the time. I stopped engaging with my coworkers and focused on my work. I even adjusted my diet to minimize bathroom breaks, and I consulted my doctor, who provided a note stating I could use the bathroom as needed. HR was unaware of the situation and was baffled that I even needed a note for something so basic. Meanwhile, BH grew increasingly frustrated with my new approach.
Instead of calling out to me, he had to walk over to get my attention, which I found amusing. Weeks later, he pulled me into his office, complaining that my lack of socializing was making him uncomfortable. I reminded him that it was his orders that led to my behavior, and that my productivity had actually increased. I wasn't going to apologize for enjoying my work. I maintained this routine for an entire year before I finally put in my 2 weeks' notice, just before my 7-year anniversary. It felt like the perfect way to enact my revenge. I hope you enjoyed this story, and stay tuned for more tales about BH and my experiences. My new job didn't tell me there are no visible tattoos policy until after I was hired. I'm an early childhood professional with over a decade of experience, currently finishing my master's degree. I have several large tattoos on my forearms, all of them plant-themed, and 2 nose rings. In my previous roles, my appearance was never an issue, except for one time when I switched from hoops to studs to keep the kids from grabbing them. Recently, after a lengthy hiring process that included a video interview and an in-person meeting, I accepted a position at a new organization I was really excited about. On my first day, I received a thick book of policies to review, including the dress code. The HR director had discussed most points with me during the interview, but one crucial detail was missing: the policy against visible tattoos and facial piercings. I immediately approached the HR director, reminding her of my appearance and asking how strict this policy was. She confirmed it was very firm. I would need to remove my nose rings, even though they were covered by a mask, and wear long sleeves or wrap my arms in cloth bandages to hide my tattoos. Hand washing is constant in early childhood settings, and I asked how to manage that with bandages. I was told I could change them if they got wet. When I questioned why this policy hadn't been mentioned earlier, it was brushed off, with another supervisor saying she hadn't noticed my tattoos before. The HR director explained that this policy had been enacted years ago due to concerns from parents about gang-related tattoos, emphasizing the need for a safe school environment. While I understood their reasoning, it didn't make me feel any better. I was surprised to face this issue in 2022, especially during a staffing crisis in my field. I knew they had the right to enforce this policy, but I wondered if the hiring team had handled it appropriately. Should I start asking upfront about my tattoos and piercings? I've always preferred to focus on my skills rather than my appearance, but I didn't want to go through this again. A few months later, I decided that this environment wasn't right for me. The tattoo and piercing issue was significant, but I also had concerns about COVID safety and communication with administration. I chose to resign immediately after my first day. I know it's not typical to leave so quickly, but I felt it was the right decision, since my first 2 weeks would have been training. Fortunately, this turned out to be a great choice. I filled my employment gap with short-term nanny work and babysitting, which allowed me to apply for a fantastic school. During my second interview, I asked the director if my tattoos or piercings would be an issue. She assured me they wouldn't, and even expressed how no one should have to worry about such things when applying for jobs. That was a major green flag for me, and it turned out to be the perfect place to work. Today, my wife met my girlfriend. I'm a 32-year-old man and a widow. My wife passed away from pancreatic cancer 5 years ago, leaving behind 2 kids, R, who's now 10, and H, who's 7. My wife was the light of my life. We were high school sweethearts, went to the same college, and got married right after graduation. Losing her was indescribable. I prayed to fall asleep and never wake up, just to see her one last time. But every time I thought about it, I'd look at our kids. They carried her spirit and her smile, and I couldn't leave them. It took years for me to find a way to function again. I quit my job and lived off savings and her life insurance for about a year. I felt like half the dad I used to be. 2 years after her passing, I decided it was time to move forward. I found a new job in a different city, closer to my parents, and packed up the kids. Life was tough, but slowly I began to find joy again. A year after the move, I went on a business trip to New York, where I met my current girlfriend, Elle. There was chemistry, but I made it clear I was still married in my heart. A few months later, I returned to New York, and we met up again. This time, I let my guard down, and before I knew it, she was transferring to my city. I fell in love with her, and a year ago, I asked her out. My kids adore her, and even though she reminds them she'll never take their mom's place, they lovingly call her Mama Elle. Today marked the anniversary of my wife's passing, a day that's always difficult for us. This morning, I walked into the living room to find Elle and my kids waiting for me. They were dressed in their best clothes, holding bouquets with big smiles on their faces. Elle had the wonderful idea of having a picnic at my wife's grave, which the boys loved. While I was sleeping, they prepared food and flowers, wanting to honor their mom. Seeing them like that brought tears to my eyes. I felt so lucky to have found love again. I wanted my wife to meet this amazing woman, so I asked Elle to come along, and she did. What I usually dread turned into a beautiful reminder of why I stayed here. To my lovely wife, you can never be replaced, but Elle is good to me and cares for our kids just like you would. Thank you for sending her to me. TIFU? I tried to break into my own house, got arrested, and tried to run away. So technically, this isn't a today I messed up moment. It happened years ago, but trust me, it was definitely a mistake. I was about 22 at the time, having returned to live with my parents after leaving home at 16. I had a habit of going out on Friday and Saturday nights, getting completely intoxicated, and waking everyone up when I came home in the early hours. As you can imagine, this didn't win me any popularity points with my parents, leading to more than a few heated conversations. But I was young, selfish, and didn't care about anyone but myself. One fateful weekend, I went out on Friday night and came home around 3 a.m., completely blitzed. I suddenly realized I had left my jacket at the pub. I thought banging on the door until my parents let me in was a good idea. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The next morning, we had a huge argument. They made it clear that if I did this again, I'd have to move out. I actually felt bad and it sunk in. That evening, I went out again, met my friends at the pub, and spent the night drinking before heading to a house party. Once again, I found myself outside my parents' house around 3 a.m., completely out of it, when I realized I didn't have my keys. My mother's earlier warning echoed in my mind, and I knew waking them up would lead to trouble. But all I wanted was my bed. Then I had what I thought was a brilliant idea. My bedroom was at the front of the house, and while the main windows were shut, the skylight was open. If I could just reach it, I went around to the back, climbed over the fence, and let myself into the garage. I found a couple of ladders, one of which was a 3-piece extendable ladder. I took it off the wall hooks, carried it out, and somehow didn't knock over too much. I got the ladder into the garden, hoisted it over the fence, and set it up against my bedroom window. In my mind, I was being stealthy and ninja-like. I climbed to the top and tried to wriggle into the skylight head first, but I got stuck. My jeans and belt caught on the window latch, and no matter how much I struggled, I couldn't get past it. I don't know how long I was stuck there, but eventually I decided to back out and come up with a different plan. As I wiggled backward, I suddenly noticed people in the garden shining flashlights at me and shouting. The police had arrived. Somehow I managed to climb down the ladder without falling, but as soon as I was on the ground, I was handcuffed. I looked a mess. I was covered in mud from falling in the flower bed and had blood on my shirt from scraping myself on the latch. The officers didn't believe it was my parents' house. After some arguing, one of them suggested they wake the occupants to confirm my story. Panic flooded over me. I begged them not to wake my parents. The officer replied, "See, I knew you were lying." As I was led toward the police cars, I resigned myself to a night in the cells, thinking it was better than facing my mom's wrath. Just as I was being walked away, I saw the porch light come on. One of the officers was ringing the doorbell. In that moment, completely intoxicated and handcuffed, I thought of only one thing. I had to run. I bolted, jumping over obstacles, convinced I was making an amazing getaway. In reality, I barely got 3 meters before an officer built like a rugby player tackled me to the ground. I caught a glimpse of my mom in her nightgown, shouting, "I'm going to kill him," before I was buried under a pile of uniforms.
Initially, my mom was furious, but then my dad came out, spoke to the officers, and after identifying me, he started to laugh. Eventually, I was released and allowed to clean myself up. My dad, aside from being woken up, found the whole situation amusing. He talked my mom down, and by the time I sobered up, she saw the funny side too. I didn't get thrown out, and I learned my lesson. I even hid a key in the back garden for future emergencies. For the record, I did start behaving responsibly and didn't ruin my relationship with my parents. This story even made it into my wedding speeches. So to sum it up, I got drunk, tried to break into my parents' home, and then attempted to run away after getting arrested.